How do we navigate things like cultural trends, current world events, and disagreement in church? Honest Conversations is a deeper dive into some of your important questions that we don't always have time to cover in a Sunday morning service. Ready to dive in? Let's join Andrew and Brooke for today's Honest Conversation.
Singleness. I am going to be posing a lot of questions from listeners today. Excellent. Because I think they say it best.
Excellent.
But to orient us all around this topic, I want to start with what you said in the message, that singleness is a uniquely Western idea, that it's something you should strive for. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on our concept of singleness today and how it's different from history?
Yeah. Something that I've been asked specifically, but it's also said, things like this are said all the time just in the world and in the water we're swimming in, is like this idea that the nuclear family is like a Western concept or white concept or something like that. And like, well, what about that, Andrew? This is just all a Western idea or something. But I don't see any evidence of that. Mainly like Genesis 1 and 2 is not like a Western book that was written, so it's pretty old, and there's just not evidence for all of that through history. So what I was proposing was that if there is a uniquely Western idea that we need to evaluate on those foundations, I think it's this idea, like you said, that singleness as a way of self-actualization and finding your place in the world as something to strive for, that's a pretty new Western, that's not been the norm of human history throughout cultures, is what I'm saying by that.
Yeah. You said that if God gives you the gift of singleness, it's not for you. And that kind of sets in place that concept of that no matter what God gives us, whether a gift of family or a gift of singleness, it is a gift to be used for the kingdom. This is not so that I have more freedom to go do X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. This is so that you have more freedom to serve the kingdom, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in the message, something I said was like, this singleness thing is sort of one of the spokes around the hub of individualism in our culture, so if you continue to kind of peel back the onions on it, the idea that singleness is something to aim for as self-actualization implies that the highest goal is for just me to be myself. And that, again, is a pretty new concept. It ditches the idea of our communal identity and our need for community and our social interaction and our role in society. And actually, there's a lot of who we are as individuals that is rightly to be found in the society. What we're saying is that the Bible teaches that the first society is the family. Does it make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. You said that, if you desire to be married, singleness is an affliction and you don't have to act like it isn't. It's the first time I've heard it said in such strong words, affliction, singleness. What was your point there as far as, is it important how you view, singleness as a whole?
Part of what I was talking about is in contrast to it being a gift. And I think that there's a growing sentiment that singleness is a gift. And so it's something that we should embrace. And that's something we should embrace as a culture. It's something we should embrace as the church. And it's something that single people should embrace for themselves and be thankful for and receive from God this gift of singleness. So on one hand, maybe singleness is a gift in the sense that it's an opportunity. There's awesome things about being single and being totally free from being bound to anybody else. Like that's awesome. And there's great independence there and freedom there. And you can say yes to lots of things, and like, that's great. And then once you're not single anymore, you don't get that stuff anymore. You get other stuff, but you don't get that stuff. And so that's fair. But the idea of where I think the point that people are trying to make is that, no, being single is just, it's awesome. And so you should just embrace it as a gift and not even really want to not be single. And there's just a lot of single people who don't want to be single, and they're being told, well, this is a gift, and it's a gift from God. God's given you this gift of singleness right now. So the point that I'm trying to make is, okay, sort of, you have this opportunity of being single right now, and you can give yourself to the Lord and stuff as a single person in a unique way compared to when you're married or with children. And in those environments, or when you get married or when you have children, you all can also give yourself to the Lord in unique ways that you can't while you're single. So in one sense, okay, I see what you mean. It's a gift, but I don't think, again, that's not really how it's being meant. That's not how it's meant. And so I think single people are feeling like, well, I heard one person talk about it's like getting the ugly sweater at Christmas and holding it up in front of everybody and being like, oh, thanks, I love it. Like, I feel like I'm supposed to be loving this right now.
Yeah, that's a great illustration.
I just don't, I don't think that we need to be, content in the Lord and receive things, but we need to receive them accurately.
Yeah.
So that's why we're talking about the word affliction. I'm not making the statement, singleness is an affliction, and if you are single, you are an afflicted person. I'm saying if singleness is an affliction to you, it is. And more saying, if you're saying, they're saying, well, singleness isn't a gift for me. Like, this is not a nice present.
Right.
Then like, okay, yeah, well then pretty sure that's kind of how we define afflictions. Like, this causes me pain.
Right. And if you can't be real with yourself in that, you can't be real with God in it, right?
Yeah, and you can't receive what God's actually giving you, because there is, like I talked about, affliction is a gift. So singleness is a gift only in the sense that it's an affliction. If it's an affliction to you, then it is a gift in the sense that it is the gift of an affliction.
Yeah.
So it should be treated in that way, because then you can actually meet with God and walk through that in reality instead of pretending it's one thing when it's not.
Because you said suffering is always an opportunity for reward.
Yeah, of course.
And
I mean, yeah, and we know that that's true. Suffering is that really weird, paradoxical reality that in the Lord, suffering is a gift, even though it's suffering.
Yeah. Somebody asked, do you think that there are circumstances where God would allow a person to live in that affliction for his glory? They said 2 Corinthians 12. I've heard so many people tell me if God gave you a desire for marriage or whatever, he will give it to you. But I think it's so reasonable that God could withhold that blessing or not remove the affliction for his glory so that we learn to be truly satisfied in him alone.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, because God allows us to go through every affliction for his glory.
Knowing that there is always forgiveness and grace, but earthly consequences for sin are still a very real thing. Do you think unwanted singleness is sometimes just a consequence we have to deal with? For example, let's say someone spent their entire early adult life buying into the lie of independent singleness and selfishness, and by the time their eyes were open to the truth, they're past marrying age, so they therefore just have to live with the consequences of believing that lie.
Yeah, there's always has to be humility in us to understand that there are consequences for sin. We also don't need to close the book that's not ours to close. So even the comment about, past marrying age, I understand the point, and, there's something there. Also, that's not a hard stop. There's not some age that is the defined, beyond marrying age type of thing. So that's where we've got to seek the Lord, and I think be honest. And as long as you have that desire, just like any other desire, for a good thing, we have to present it like, let's take it to the Lord who cares for us and loves us, and we can cast our burdens on him. That doesn't always mean we end up getting what we want. But yeah, like I said, we don't need to close a book that's not ours to close just because we have, there's some good theology in there, but that doesn't make me God just because I have some good theology on something.
Yeah. There were a couple questions surrounding work and careers from women. One saying, if having a family may be a desire, should I avoid professional advancement to seek after creating a family first? And I'll kind of lump this other question in with it. How do I manage as a single professional, seemingly following God's calling in my profession, the idea that it is within my greater design to be married and have children? Am I going against my design if I'm practicing my nurturing or leadership within my professional influence and utilize making disciples in my profession rather than through leaning into getting married and having a family?
Yeah, that's a great question. What was the first one?
It was, if having a family may be a desire, should I avoid professional advancement to seek after creating a family first?
I don't think so. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive when they're separate. I think that there's probably going to be some questions to answer if and when you get married and have kids, in that situation, which doesn't mean don't go for the positions, but you can go for the positions knowing, well, what I really want is to get married and have kids. And so hopefully you are able to get married and you have kids knowing that, okay, at some point there's going to be I'm going to have to pick one probably, because that's just kind of the reality of the situation. So go for it, but know what you really want and what God's really calling you to. But when you're not married and don't have kids, you don't have to act like you're married and have kids. And then what was the second question?
It was pretty much that, am I going against my design if I'm practicing nurturing or leadership within professional influence rather than leaning into getting married and having a family?
Right. No, you're not. And again, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. I think, the calling to be nurturing in a woman really is kind of a 24/7 thing, just like it is for a man to like bring order to stuff. So let's look at it kind of from the bottom up instead of the top down in that sense. Like, oh, you are a nurturer and you should nurture the life of God wherever you go. So yeah, whatever job you're doing or team you're on or what, like, yes, like bring to life the things of God and bring the best out of people. Like, absolutely go for that. So that's how you partner with God in your calling, and no matter what situation that you're in.
Can I offer an example?
Please.
So I was in college studying broadcasting, and one of our part-time teachers was a female news anchor in Philadelphia who left her job to do this part-time teaching because of kids. And I remember thinking, what a not smart person. Like, I just had no respect for it. I thought women can do everything. Like, what kind of, And now, fast forward 15 years, I've done the same thing. And I realized how much wisdom she had in that. And it's really made me understand that, like, for women, there's nothing wrong with advancement and using your God-given talents, wherever he leads. But it's like, as long as they don't, as long as your hands are always open to God gives and he takes away, and in seasons that will look different, but sometimes it's the advancement that makes you feel like you can't give it away again.
For sure.
So it doesn't mean don't pursue that. It just means be careful that it's not becoming a God in and of itself.
100%. 100%. And that's true for everybody and everything.
Yes.
Like anybody's job
It's
can
not
become
just
that
women.
thing.
Yes.
Any dollar amount becomes that thing.
Yes.
Any house, any car, any clothes, anything can become the thing that I can't give up. And that whatever becomes that thing is a problem. Hobbies can become that thing. I mean, just like I have to have this if I'm going to unwind. You know what I mean? Like it's,
right.
So that's you're just hitting on kind of like idolatry, really. Like, what is there anything in my life that is the thing I can't let go of for the call of God? And there's some blanket stuff in there, but God can call any of us to anything, and
Right.
just because I may do one thing doesn't mean everybody has to. Everybody needs to obey God, but maybe God didn't tell everybody to do that exact thing that he told me,
Right.
But again, there are still the universal things. I think that's a great point that you're making.
Singles can still be fruitful and multiply. Can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, God says, or Jesus says, go make disciples. So you can be fruitful and multiply the kingdom of God. That's not having children is not the only way to be fruitful and to multiply in the kingdom of God. Make disciples and, order the world around you, nurture the life of God, see the things of God grow and multiply in your life, and partner with what God's doing in other people's life to see his kingdom grow and multiply in them. That's what we all need to do. That's foundational before you even get to getting married and having kids. Like, let's be those people before we get married and have kids, so that once we get married and have kids, this starts happening in the home as well.
What do you say about addressing the issue of loneliness? And maybe this is kind of coincides with being fruitful and multiply, still having community around you. But loneliness can be a really real thing for singles. How to address that?
How to address it? What do you mean address it?
How to deal with it? How to walk through it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, good question. I think that reminds me of one of the things we started talking about at the beginning here about the affliction thing. I think that's where that word is helpful to understand that, like, if you want to get married and you're not, and that makes you feel lonely, there's nothing wrong with you. That's perfectly reasonable and normal. And that is like, okay, it's good to know. Okay, that's like an affliction in my life. So I don't need to start with saying, what's my unique affliction of loneliness and how do I handle that? Start with the universal things of, what do I do when I'm suffering from something? How do I handle affliction in my life? I have to go to the Lord. I have to I have to fellowship with him in sufferings. Lord, where have you felt lonely? I can't believe like, you were a person that had everybody deserted. Fellowship with God, be loved by God, and carry the tension that you do have this desire. And trying to stifle it's not going to make it go away. It's just going to make it more painful. So the best way, we have to deal with affliction by dealing with it, which is uncomfortable. And sometimes we say, how do I deal with this affliction? What we mean is, how do I make it stop hurting? But dealing with affliction doesn't necessarily mean it stops hurting. It just means you're like dealing with it. You're really just recognizing the pain, and you're taking it to the Lord, and you're taking it to other people, and you're doing those things that go into dealing with affliction, as opposed to trying to ignore it or pretend that you love it even when you hate it. So it's okay to feel lonely when you're lonely. Yeah. That doesn't make you depressed. It doesn't make you discontent. It doesn't make you grumpy. It doesn't make you any of those things. It just means you're lonely, and that's okay. Like I said, it's normal to want a family. It's just that's a normal part of the human experience, to want family, to want community, and all of these things. It's hardwired into us, which is why then the gift of singleness that we talked about, kind of more in the line of like this celibacy idea for the kingdom of God, why that is a unique gift that is for the kingdom. But the vast majority of people, it's like, well, of course you feel like, of course you're sad you don't have what you want. That's okay. That's okay. You're not wrong for that. And I can't make that go away necessarily. But that's not necessarily really the goal we're just after, is to make all the bad things go away. We are invited to fellowship with God.
Somebody asked, do you have a specific word for how married couples can encourage or spur on singles? How can a husband live out his assignment to order with a single friend, and vice versa for a wife? We want to love and encourage singles, and just wanted to see if you had some specific word on how to live out our assignment for them, practical action requested.
Practical action requested. Request recognized. I think just encourage people in the Lord. Like, what's God calling you? Just like you would with anybody else. Like, what's God calling you to right now in your life, and how can I encourage you towards that?
Yeah.
Like, let's go after that.
Yeah.
And if that is if you're kind of single and loving it right now, and then you ought to be on mission towards God. Don't just be independent,
Yeah.
And have your fun. Like, there's the kingdom of God to be a part of. So
Right.
if you're going to be single, then give yourself to the kingdom wholeheartedly. Go for it. Like, I want to encourage you in that, because we all get better when the other one of us does what God's called us to do.
Yeah.
But if you're just messing around, like doing nothing, but you're awesome, there might be a time to be like, hey, dude, you are an awesome man of God, and you're just messing around, and you don't want to be single for the long haul. You just are embracing it for right now. Like, why you quit being lazy, and like, I dare you, go find a good girl. Like, come on, what are you waiting for? Get married to an awesome girl and have awesome kids, because you are awesome. There's a time and a place for that.
Yeah.
And there's a time and a place for like, no, I think you're doing great. Like, it's just, there's not this blanket thing other than let's go after God together, and let's encourage each other towards that. Let's encourage men to be men. So let's encourage Christians to be Christians, and let's encourage men to be men, and let's encourage women to be women. And if we can really get those big rocks in place, that'd be pretty transformative.
Okay, I'm going to go there because you mentioned it, but I saw at
Where are we
least
going, Diego?
one playful eye roll when you encouraged women to at least go out with a guy who's had a conversation with leadership about pursuing a dating relationship. You said, give him a chance, just go out with him. And I saw at least one eye roll, playful. But what is so important about bringing in leadership and church community into these decisions about dating and if you should go for somebody? What's the importance there?
Well, the alternative is doing it alone.
Yeah.
So that doesn't sound like a great option.
Yeah.
This is important.
But you're saying it's important. I mean, I think that's what I had honestly never considered. I mean, it's been a while since I've been single, but I had not considered bringing church leadership into a decision making about asking somebody out.
Yeah.
But it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah, it does make sense. And, it could be a pastor, elder, or just somebody that you trust in the Lord that you are giving authority to in your life to say, like, I mean, shouldn't we all want to be a part of a community where we want men and women of God around us speaking into our lives? Like, isn't that kind of what can be awesome about the church? To be like, there's all of these amazing men and women of God around here. Some of them are older than me. Some of them are younger than me. Some of them are in the same season as me. Like, we should totally do this together, because y'all are awesome and I'm awesome. And so let's follow God together and be humble. And, like, you have blind spots. Everybody does. And so we shouldn't just bring each other in for these decisions. We should really, this is a subset of, we should bring each other into more decisions in our lives.
Yeah.
The parenting episode we just did, schooling, extracurricular stuff, like, what's your life group saying? They know you, they know your capacity, they know what you've been complaining about how busy you are or how not busy you are, or what your kids are doing well in or what they're not doing well in. Or, you want to ask, how do I get out of the emotions in my discipline? Bring somebody else into it and say, hey, give me your perspective on this. Not just give me your perspective on my child, give me your perspective on me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this is amazing. We are a massive resource for each other. And it's just wise to get counsel, from godly people that are around us, that love us and love God.
And who also know probably some really great other Christians.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Well, then there's that. Then that was kind of the thing of like, if, so I mentioned how Heather, on our first date, I think I mentioned this. I know I have before. When I told her,
who have you talked to?
I told her I wanted her to be my girlfriend. She's like, who else have you talked to about this? And I think that's just amazing because when I list off the names of the men that I've talked to, like, she knows they're vouching for me, and she knows those men and respects those men. So, okay, that's something. And we were talking about it, and I realized I need to definitely make sure to start including the second question that she asked me too. The second question was, what do you like so much about me?
Oh.
Like, why do you want me to be your girlfriend?
Heather with the fire
it was awesome. It was
she
awesome.
was ready.
She's like, basically like, I'm great. Why do you like me? So I would encourage
her.
those first two questions for sure. But yeah, it gives substance to the whole thing. And it's like, we're not just on an island. Like, oh, I don't know. Like, is he cute enough? And hopefully he has good character.
Yeah.
Like, why not have him be vouched for by some men who you respect, to be like, yeah, this guy's got enough character. Like, I care about you, girl, and I vouch enough for this guy's character for him to ask you out. That's pretty cool.
And that takes away 6 months of the dating process where you're having to try and figure it out
Sure could.
yourself.
Yeah, seriously.
You know what I mean?
And wondering, what don't you know?
Yeah.
What's he not telling you? You know, all these
So
sort of things.
wise.
Because it's like, I am not going to tell a guy he should totally go ask you out if he shouldn't.
Yeah. You did, however, tell guys from the stage.
Yes.
You issued advice, not a command.
Not a command, okay?
You said, men over 23 years old, do what you need to do to get married. And I audibly gasped. Cole was like, do you realize you audibly gasped? I said, yes.
In the next 24 months, I think it's like, yeah.
You said, do what you need to do in 24 months to get married. And I was like, oh, did he just say that? Because growing up in my young adulthood, I was pounded with the idea of, you have all the time. Don't settle down until you're, close to 30. Like, just this totally anti view of marriage and what it means and the beauty of it. And so to hear you issue that from the stage was, honestly, I was like, wow. So for anyone else who was like, wow.
Yeah. You weren't the only one that gasped. There was definitely some expressions that happened when I said that.
Was that your intention when you said it?
No, my intention is to put a fire in some people, because what you just said is the reason why I just said it, because you were told as a young adult, like, say it again.
Don't even think about getting married until you're close to 30.
Yeah.
Live your life.
Right.
You have so much to do.
So did anybody tell you that about your job?
No.
Don't worry about your job till you're like 30. Who cares?
Of course not.
Who cares? Anybody tell you that about paying your bills on time?
Yeah.
Or I don't know if you're talking about it being in church or not, but do we tell people that about following God? If it happens, it happens. Just do your thing. God will take care of your relationship with him. You just kind of see what happens. See what happens with you. You don't need to work that hard and pursue, extra degrees or promotion or you don't need to. God will take it. If it happens, it happens. What else do we say that about? That's important in our life.
So true.
So I'm of the conviction that this is important, that marriage is actually a really awesome thing that God's designed, and that people do want, should want, can want, and that is worth taking seriously. And having kids is the same thing. I think so the whole series is saying, and proposing, I believe this is what the Bible teaches, that this is a big deal. All I'm saying is treat big deals like big deals. That's really all I'm saying. So there's no reason why a 23-year-old man can't hear the exhortation to get his life ordered correctly in order to be a husband and a father in 2 years, when we're telling him that he should also do that for whatever else, all these other things, like his job or whatever. I think I've said this before. One good answer for a lot of the questions that we've talked about on all these episodes is, as opposed to what?
Yeah.
So all I'm doing is saying, like, I am raising my hand to say, I don't think the whole let's see if it happens thing is like makes any sense. I don't think it's reasonable or logical, and I don't think it's helpful or fruitful. And I think that, and I was talking to one guy a couple weeks recently, kind of since that message, and he's new to church and stuff. And he was like, when you said that, I thought, I have a lot of work to do.
Wow.
And I was like, does it? So, you ask, is that why I said it? That's why I said it. Because men need to have that thought when it comes to getting married and having kids. They need to be presented with the truth and see it for what it is and think, ooh, I have work to do. That thought is very different than we'll see if it happens.
Yeah.
Like,
It's so good.
yeah.
It's so good.
Like, if you're going to date somebody, take it seriously and, like, be awesome and date an awesome girl. And if y'all want to get married, then get married and have it be great and follow the Lord and do it unto him. And, like, there's no reason to waste your time dating somebody you don't need to date, or there's no reason to waste your time dating somebody too long who you should be getting married to.
Yeah.
Like, this is a big deal. This is awesome. This is a huge deal. All of society, like, humanity is built on the society of the home, and you have the opportunity to build one. Like, I think that's a big deal and shouldn't be on the back burner.
We are going to talk about singleness when kids are involved too. Next week, we're going to be talking about divorce and the topic of divorce. So I will save that question for next week. But for now, thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Brooke.
That's all for today's Honest Conversation. We'll see you back here next Wednesday.